Welcome. This is a tutorial on how to perform white balance and color correction in Edius. It's an issue that I've seen raised a couple of times in various online forums, and I've received private messages and emails from forum members asking for help. And rather than repeating myself over and over, I decided to put together a simple video that shows you how it's done. I'm using Edius version 4.52. If you don't recognize this program, it's probably because you're using an earlier version. In version 4.0 and then again in version 4.5, the user interface of Edius were revamped, but the techniques that I'm about to show you will work in earlier versions as well. So if you don't have 4.5, don't worry, you can still do the same things. I'm going to use a clip that I recorded this morning, for which I intentionally selected the wrong white balance preset in my camera, and I also applied one of the built-in neutral density filters to reduce the amount of light. And the scene as a whole is a little bit underexposed, and I'm going to show you how to correct both of those problems. First, we're going to fix the white balance. You'll notice that this white stucco wall has a blue hint to it, and the vegetation over here on the right looks gray and completely lifeless. And then some of the areas in the scene are just too dark, and we're going to fix that. So the way we do that is we go to the effects palette and we find the white balance filter, and you click on that filter and drag it down onto the clip. Then you go to the information palette and double click on the filter that you just added to the clip to bring up the settings dialog. And the dialog is probably overwhelming if you've never done color correction or white balance adjustments before in Edius or any other editor for that matter, but it's really not that bad. The defaults that Edius selects for you are actually fairly intelligent, and at a minimum, all you have to do now is click on a portion of the scene that is a neutral color. Now, neutral color doesn't necessarily mean white. We are adjusting the white balance, but we don't have to find something that is white. As long as we have equal amounts of red, green, and blue in the color, it will work. And there are an infinite number of such colors between pure white and pure black. There are tons and tons of shades of gray that will work, and we're gonna just poke around the scene and see if we can find something that will work for this white balance correction. So there are some things over here that look white, and I'm clicking on it and I'm really not getting anywhere. You sometimes notice a shift in the color as I click on different things. It's the white stucco. Up here there's some metal flashing from a planter that I can click on. That's more of a gray than the wall itself is, but none of these work 100%. The wall itself is not a real white, it's slightly off-white, and it's also stained from organic matter, water that ran down from the planter when it rained. And the gray flashing is also stained a little bit. But it turns out that down here on the ground there is a sealant that's applied to the deck, and it's a darker gray than the gray on the planter, and it's certainly far darker than the slightly off-white wall, but it does give me a surprisingly good white balance. So keep that in mind when you try to do white balance correction. There are just tons and tons of shades that might work. It gave me a very useful white balance. It is actually very close to what I saw this morning when I filmed this. And as I scrub this, you can see that the vegetation is green. Even what appeared completely dead and gray earlier is now green again as I scrub this timeline. Now, one other thing I want to show you is that there's a set of controls over here labeled preview, and this controls the preview area that is being used to preview the effects of the filter. By default, you preview your filter using the entire preview window, but we can limit that to just the left, the right, the top or bottom half of the screen. And if I click on this, you can see here's a nice, fairly warm color that matches the sun this morning. And this is what I had actually recorded. It's got this horrible blue and dead gray vegetation, and it's just unappealing. In addition to choosing the section of the display that I want to use for previewing the filter, I can also adjust the proportions over on the right. There's a control here that I can type values into, or I can use the mouse wheel as indicated by the cursor with the up and down arrow. I can use the mouse wheel, roll it up and down, and adjust the preview area, and use different proportions of the display to see how my filter settings affect my clip. Now, regardless of what you select over here in the preview controls, when you click the OK button, the filter is applied to the entire scene, not just the preview area that you selected. You can also adjust your white balance by taking control of these controls up here for yourself. You can control the white balance in the shadows using the black balance, in the midtones using the gray balance, and using the highlights using the white balance set of color controls. So if you can't find something that's a neutral color in that scene, you can pick these up and adjust them yourself and hopefully correct your white balance. But I'm just going to click OK to accept what I've done, because I have already confirmed that what I'm seeing is representative of the scene this morning. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to bring up the brightness of my scene a little bit, because the 1/8 neutral density filter that I had applied made the scene a little bit too dark. It just lacks vibrance. So the way we can do that is we can go back to the effects palette, and we could go and grab the color balance filter and drop that onto our clip. And when you open up the settings here, you see there's a slider for brightness. I can bring this up or move it down. There are obviously a couple of other controls, and you can keyframe the whole thing. But I noticed that when I moved the brightness, as I was increasing the brightness to a level where the vegetation looked good, the shadow areas became sort of gray and washed out, and also the detail in the stucco, the white stucco wall, disappeared pretty much completely. So I'm not going to use this filter. It just does not provide the level of control that I need this time. So I'm going to make sure that it is selected, and I can hit the delete key on my keyboard, or I can click up here and delete the filter that way. And instead I'm going to go back to the effect palette, and I'm going to apply a curve filter to my clip. And the curve filter gives me more control over luminance, and I can adjust the shadows and the highlights individually. So as I click on this curve, I can drag it up and down, and I can make adjustments to portions of the luminance range. I can click anywhere and create additional spline points, and if I don't want them, I can highlight them using the mouse, and by hitting the delete key I can delete them again. But this works for what I have. The white wall is not blown out. The color of the vegetation looks better. It has more life to it, and the shadows are not a gray muddy mess. So I'm pretty happy with this. Again, I can see what I've actually done to my clip by choosing a different preview area, and I can also scrub this clip and see the before and after, and when I'm happy I click OK and I'm done. I could have done all of this, the white balance correction and the luminance correction, using a curve in less than half a minute if I hadn't been going through this slowly and describing what I was doing for this tutorial. Now, there's one more thing I want to do. I am happy with what I'm seeing. It is representative of the scene this morning as I recall it, but I did like the somewhat punchier blue sky that I had before I applied the white balance filter. I'm going to turn the filter off for a second and show you what it looked like. There's a nice blue sky, whereas what was outside this morning was a little bit hazy and gray. I'm just a few blocks from the Pacific Ocean, and I actually would like to get back that blue sky if I could without messing up the overall colors of the vegetation and the building next door and this French door. So there is a way to do that. So we want to keep the white balance filter enabled. We're going to keep those changes, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our effects palette, select the white balance filter again, and drag a second instance of that onto our clip. So now if we go to the information palette, we see that we have two white balance filters. The one that actually adjusted the white balance, and one that we just added, which we haven't customized yet. We're going to double click on this filter to bring up the settings dialog, and now we're going to use the same filter in another way to adjust just the blue of the sky. And the way we do that this time is down in the color picker area. Instead of using one of the first four options, we're going to pick the last one, which is color range. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to select a color in that scene that we wish to adjust. And in addition to choosing color range, we need to enable at least one of these color limiters. I'm going to enable the hue limiter, the saturation limiter, and the luminance limiter. And again, Edius has selected somewhat intelligent defaults, but the defaults happen to be for green screen work. You'll notice that the limiters currently describe a range of blues and greens that are useful for blue screen and green screen works. It actually analyzes the scene and tries to come up with a reasonable default. And they're just not going to be useful for what we're doing. We want to get just the blue of the sky. So how do we do that? Well, we could pick up these handles and slide them over to the left to grab more of the blue of the sky and get rid of the green, because we obviously don't want to mess with the green. The vegetation is fine. But this is somewhat error prone. A better way would be to simply click in portions of the sky that has the colors that we want to adjust. Now, I'm going to adjust these limiters right now and give us some values that make absolutely no sense. Right now it includes pink and purple. But you'll notice that when I click on a portion of the sky, all three limiters will be adjusted by Edius and snap to represent the blue that I clicked on. Currently you can see there's pink and purple, and well, there's blue over on the right, but on the left hand side it's certainly the wrong color. And when I click, the limiters have been adjusted to represent the color, saturation, and luminance that I clicked on. this represents a narrow band of colors. I could manually adjust them and narrow them down even more, but I actually want to expand them. There are multiple shades of blue in the sky, and I want to include all of them. And the way I do that is I hold down the Shift key and I just click on different shades of blue in the sky that I want to have included when I adjust the white balance. And I want to make sure I get these lighter blues over here in between the trees. And as I did that, Edius adjusted all three of these sliders, the hue, the saturation, and the luminance, to describe the range of blues that I clicked on. At least that is what I think it did, and there's actually a way to confirm that. If you go over here to the right, there's a button labeled Key Display. When you click on Key Display, Edius will reveal in white the portions of the image that are included, and I can scrub the timeline and show you that this is in fact the sky that we're looking at. And down here there's a little bit of blue. I think that is a solar panel on the building next door that has a little bit of blue in it, but I'm going to ignore that. So yes, what we're looking at, what was selected by initially clicking and then shift clicking, was a range of colors in the sky. Yes, see, there's a solar panel on the building next door. So we've set up a key that maps to the blues in the sky, and now we are ready to adjust those colors. And to do that, we again call on the color controls at the top here that were also available for selecting a white balance when we did the actual white balance adjustment initially. We've got the black balance set of controls that controls the shadows. We've got the gray balance, which adjusts the midtones, and we have the white balance set of controls for the highlights. And I can pick these up and move them, and you'll notice that nothing happens. I can pick these up, nothing happens. Well, the reason for that is that we don't have any shadows or highlights in the sky right now. All the blues are a fairly uniform blue in the midtone range. So in this particular example, the black balance control and the white balance control don't do anything. I'm simply going to click on default and reset them to their initial state, and instead I'm going to go to the gray balance color control, and as I move that, you can see that moving it into a orange section turns the sky orange or pink or purple or blue or green. Now I don't want to do that. I don't want to turn the sky purple or any other color. I want to leave it blue, and I was actually happy with the blue that I had. So I'm going back to default. That's the blue I started with. And instead of shifting the color balance into another portion of the spectrum, I'm simply going to adjust the saturation and punch up the sky a little bit. The center position is 100. On the far left is 0, which actually desaturates all color information, and this gives you grayscale. It removes all color information. So we're now looking at different shades of gray for the sky. If we move it back to 100, this is where we started. If we move it to the right to about 150, we have a nice rich blue for the sky that looks far nicer than what I actually saw outside this morning, but I like it, so that's what I'm going to go for. I can move the slider, I can type in a value, or I can use the mouse wheel as indicated by this particular cursor with the up and down arrow to adjust it. I don't even have to have the mouse over that control anymore. As long as the focus is on that control, I can use the mouse wheel to adjust these. So here we are at 150. We have a nice blue sky. I can preview using just a portion. I'm going to preview on the right this time. You can see there's the nice blue sky. On the left is the original that we started with, which is somewhat gray and dull, but the vegetation that is in both areas of the preview window, on the left before and on the right after, you see it has not been affected at all by my changes. So these settings work for me. I click the OK button and I've done all three things. I've fixed the white balance, I've brought up the luminance selectively, and in the end I added some punch to the sky and did selective color correction. All of this is being done in real time on a high definition clip. This is a DVC Pro HD clip from a Panasonic HVX 200, and all of this is being done in real time using the native codec, no editing codec, in real time. That's Edius for you. Thank you for watching.